Tom Costello. Happy Friday. I'm in for Hallie, and the January 6th committee has now officially subpoenaed former President Trump, compelling him to testify and turn over documents surrounding his actions on January 6th and the January 6th insurrection, the Capitol insurrection that the committee says he instigated. This is it. This is the subpoena, which says he has until November 4th to turn over requested documents, and he must testify on November 14th. After the midterms. Now, committee chairman Benny Thompson and vice chair Liz Cheney, writing in a letter to Mr. Trump, said, quote, "We have assembled overwhelming evidence that you personally orchestrated and oversaw a multi-part effort to overturn the 2020 presidential election and to obstruct the peaceful transition of power." The big question now, will he or won't he comply? And what kind of legal battle could lie ahead? It comes as we have now a new poll. Look at this, finding that most of America, 2/3 of those asked, think that, in fact, Mr. Trump should have to testify in front of the committee. NBC congressional correspondent Hallie is on Capitol Hill. And Hallie, the committee laid out many allegations against Mr. Trump in this letter and specifically said that they want him to talk about conversations he had with these people. Coming up on your screen, Roger Stone, Michael Flynn. We also have John Eastman, Jeffrey Clark, and Kelly Ward. What is the committee getting at here? Talk us through what the members are alleging and hoping to find out.
Well, Tom, they're not really leaving much unsaid in this subpoena and in the letter. They're clear with what they're looking for the former president. They want his side of the conversations that he had with the people who were on your screen. Many of them were involved in the scheme to do false slates of electors, to overturn the election results in some states. These are characters in the drama, frankly, that the January 6th committee has created for the American public, who we know well. People like John Eastman, who was a lawyer for the former president, who was involved in trying to help convince Mike Pence and pressure him to effectively overturn the election results. And I'll bring up for you a list of bullet points that struck me as I was reading through this letter in the subpoena. One of the things that they list is the fact that Trump was illegally pressuring Mike Pence, but not just Pence, members of Congress. They also mention the fact that he was filing false information under oath in federal court. To me, that's something similar to what we heard out of a judge in California recently that was in John Eastman's emails. They talk about how Trump summoned thousands of supporters to Washington on January 6th, and it follows with the allegation that he refused to disband those rioters. A whole list of things, again, Tom, that the committee is trying to hear from him. And it was also pretty striking to me that the way that they wrote this letter was a lot of you. They put these allegations squarely at the feet of the former president. And look, multiple prosecutors who are experts on our air have said throughout the day, the reason that you invite someone to testify or subpoena them in this case is so that they can tell their side of the story. If the allegations are wrong, they get to say they're wrong. Or in the case of some other things, they can plead the fifth. That's their right.
You know, interestingly, this is not the first time that a president has been subpoenaed. Former presidents, for example, Teddy Roosevelt, Harry Truman, Gerald Ford, they all testified after they left office. The committee's timeline for President Trump to comply is less than a month away. The former president's legal team released a statement late today saying they are going to look into the subpoena and respond as appropriate. Give me a reality check. Does the committee really expect that he will show up and comply?
I think that people put their crystal balls away, candidly, Tom, myself included. But look, Trump has not said either way, but when the committee made this decision to go forward with the subpoena, they knew that it was going to be a tough road ahead, but they felt that it was important to put it on the record and at least show that they tried to give him the opportunity.
He, listen, no secret, he likes an audience and he likes a stage, and this would be that. So is the bigger question, what does the committee intend to do if he does not comply? They could have a very short tenure left if the Republicans take the House.
Look at where we are on the calendar, though, at this point. And it's why the big question was why they waited so long to subpoena him, which the committee says they wanted to lay out all the evidence they had before subpoenaing the former president. But they now are not entertaining what the battle might look like to enforce this subpoena, in part because that would be unprecedented. It's not unprecedented for former presidents or even sitting presidents to comply with congressional subpoenas, to sit for interviews, to give documents. That's not the crazy thing here that's out of traditional norms. The thing that's uncharted is what happens when a president balks at the subpoena. And that could be something that we see here. But look at where we are on the calendar. The subpoena itself expires at the end of the year. The committee itself could be done by then, depending on who controls Congress. The calendar is not exactly in their favor. And look, if there's anything that you saw from the Steve Bannon trial, it's that this stuff takes a long time. If you're going to thumb your nose at a subpoena, there could be consequences. We're seeing that today, but it takes a while to get there.
Yeah. Hallie, never a dull moment on your beat. Thank you very much. Hallie Vitelli on Capitol Hill. All right, we have more January 6 news to tell you about. Former advisor to President Trump, Steve Bannon, was sentenced today in a D.C. courtroom to 4 months in prison and a $6,500 fine after being found guilty of 2 counts of contempt of Congress for ignoring subpoenas from the committee to speak. Now, Bannon spoke to reporters outside the courthouse after learning of the sentence today.
Today was my judgment day by the judge, and he stated for the appeal. And we'll have a very vigorous appeals process. I've got a great legal team, and there'll be multiple areas of appeal.
Bannon's legal team also confirmed that they will file an appeal, and the judge said that he will not have to serve any jail time while the appeal runs its course. NBC's Ken Delanian covers the Justice Department. So the judge here said that the minimum sentence would be a month. He gave him 4 months and a lighter fine, a lower fine than many had expected. How much of that was a surprise?
Well, some former prosecutors I talked to were surprised he got any jail time beyond the minimum. This is a misdemeanor, after all. It's a very serious matter, but it's still a misdemeanor, and the guidelines called for a maximum of 6 months, so he got 4. So the Justice Department considers this a victory, except for the part where the judge stayed the sentence pending appeal, which means that he will not have to serve this sentence for some period of time.
Therefore, he's not serving during the midterms. I mean, there is potentially a political calculus there. All right, we've got a lot of people already taking to Twitter on this, as I understand it. One tweet says, "I stand with Steve Bannon. So do we think this creates even more of a rallying cry for the Trump world out there, for MAGA world out there? He could go down as, quote unquote, a martyr for the cause."
I think it absolutely does. That's the climate we're in right now. It's almost as if Steve Bannon won. He's going to serve 4 months at some point, or maybe he won't, but he's withheld successfully documents and his testimony from this investigation, which the MAGA crowd says is a witch hunt and is rigged. And he was, as you saw there, was defiant outside of court today.
So he could end up being the first person to serve jail time for defying a congressional subpoena in 50 years. Peter Navarro, also charged with contempt of Congress, has his trial now set for next month. Does this sentence in any way potentially set a precedent for that, or a tone for that?
It certainly does. And, you know, Peter Navarro is a different kind of a character than Steve Bannon. He has complained already about his treatment in custody by federal agents. And, you know, Steve Bannon may be willing to serve 4 months in jail. I'm not sure Peter Navarro is. Perhaps Peter Navarro is rethinking, because it's the same exact case. 2 counts of contempt. He's ignored. He hasn't provided any documents.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just going to say Bannon is a lot more polarizing, though, than Navarro. A lot more. He loves the stage as much as Trump does.
Exactly. And Peter Navarro may be thinking, do I really want to go through with this and serve 4 months in jail? Right now, he's fighting it, and he's pleaded not guilty. We'll see what happens.
All right. Mr. Delanian, thank you. Busy day on your beat as well.
Yeah,
always a busy day for Ken. Thank you. President Biden, by the way, on his way back to the White House, wrapping a major campaign week where he's essentially saying, here's what I've done with the Democratic Congress, and if you like it, vote for us. Today's focus is inflation and his student loan relief program, after talking abortion, gas prices, and infrastructure. But the big question here is it enough to motivate his base and swing independents to vote with the Dems, for the Dems, as they try to hold on to the House and to the Senate? All the numbers right now suggest that Americans are voting with their wallets more than anything else right now. A new poll finds that nearly 80% of people say the economy is very important. The president says he understands that as he touts what he's been able to do, and he slashed the deficit, which is why he says he's confident, and he is also raising the stakes even further.
I think that we're going to see one more shift back to our side in the closing days. And let me tell you why I think that. We're starting to see some of the good news on the economy. The election is not a referendum. It's a choice. It's a choice.
The president is saying that even as the vibes around the economy, really not great, because that same new poll we mentioned shows that almost every American is concerned about the price of food and consumer goods. 95% high marks here for gas and housing prices and supply chain issues as well, as you can see. That is why in the last hour or so, the president's been talking about really one of his more popular issues, more tenuous initiatives, canceling student loan debt, which may start Sunday after 2 legal challenges were defeated. Today, speaking at a historically black college in his home state of Delaware, he's saying this plan will help everybody.
Strengthens all America. When those who struggle in economic, those from backgrounds like a lot of us, when we do well, the whole country does well. The wealthy do well. Everyone does well.
NBC's Josh Letterman is traveling with the president in Dover, Delaware. And Josh, we heard the president say this election is not a referendum, it's a choice. He seems convinced that there will be a shift back to, quote, his side, meaning Democrats. Is that confidence or wishful thinking, since the polls right now are showing races are awfully tight?
Well, there's certainly some wishful thinking involved there. So far, we haven't seen indications that the polls are swinging wildly toward Democrats' favor in the final weeks of this race. But it's also an articulation of the strategy that President Biden and Democrats are trying to employ right now, which is they are really hoping that if they just continue to hammer home these specific accomplishments, the positive, bright spots in our economy, they're hoping that eventually, Tom, that will start to seep through and start to get into, the water as people are making their decisions about the elections, and not have it be, solely focused on the negatives, on the higher prices, on the, on the inflation issues. And one of the things that White House officials are watching more closely than anything, of course, is the price of a gallon of gas. And they feel confident, according to our conversations with White House officials, that because those numbers are starting to move in the right direction again, that by the time that we get to Election Day in just a few weeks, that Americans will be a little bit more optimistic about the economy than they are right now, and that ultimately that will work out in the favor of President Biden and the Democrats he's trying to get elected this year.
One of the problems I think any administration has in trying to explain the multifaceted reasons, the global reasons for inflation, is that it's not a quick soundbite. It's complicated stuff. People get PhDs in this stuff. So it's not easily boilable, if you will. So are they going to stick with this strategy of trying to tout their accomplishments like the week we've seen behind us now?
That's exactly what they are going to do, at least for the next couple of weeks or so. White House officials say that Biden really feels that at this point in the race, really his biggest way to be helpful to Democrats is to continue to put a spotlight on these specific wins, not only the student loan issue, but, one of the biggest applause lines that President Biden had here at Delaware State today was when he talked about his move to pardon those of simple marijuana possession convictions. He talked about the Roe versus Wade issue, and he also talked about the infrastructure spending, which he was touting just yesterday when he was in Pennsylvania. So certainly for the next few weeks, it's going to be about these economic accomplishments. And then in the final week or week and a half of the election, that's where we expect to see President Biden more in explicit campaign mode, doing rallies and so forth, trying to get people out to the polls in the final days.
Okay, Josh, thank you. Josh Letterman there. So while the president is pushing his accomplishments, one Democratic senator appears to be kind of waffling right now in terms of wanting to stay near the president, if you will, waffling on the accomplishments. We're talking about Nevada's Catherine Cortez Masto. A poll showed that she is the Democratic, of course, most in danger of losing her seat right now. The latest averages suggest she's in the most competitive race in the country, trailing by just a fraction of a percent to Republican challenger and former state attorney general Adam Laxalt. It's a race well within the margin of error, the definition of really what a toss-up is all about. NBC's Garrett Hake joins me now. I almost called you Garrett Glazer. That's an old name from my past over on CNBC. Sorry, Garrett. So talk about this right now, and where do we stand on this Nevada race in particular?
Tom, it couldn't be closer. I mean, this is a race where the Republican took a very narrow lead in public and in private polling starting around Labor Day, and he has not relinquished it. And that's partly because we've seen the issue sets kind of bounce around here over the summer. There's a lot of focus on abortion rights after the Dobbs decision. That kind of consolidated the Democratic base around Catherine Cortez Masto. She has tried to keep voters focused on Adam Laxalt's role in sticking up for Donald Trump, trying to get some of the election results here in Nevada overturned after 2020. That helped to the Democratic base as well. But the economy has been the dominant issue here. Inflation, $5 a gallon gas. Nevada has some of the highest inflation in the nation, and that has made it hard for Cortez Masto, who wants to run on the accomplishments of a Democratic Senate, but doesn't necessarily want to run on the relative unpopularity of President Biden. I asked her about what the president could do to help her in this race, and, well, here's what she told me.
What would you like to see from him? Would you like to see him campaign for you? Was he talking about abortion the other day? Is that helpful? What can he do to help you?
Well, I can tell you what I hear from Nevadans, and that's my priority, and it's not what you just asked me. It is about everyday issues, kitchen table issues, how we do this together. That's my priority.
Tom, there are a lot of ways she could have answered that question, whether it was raising money or keeping the focus on some of these issues or even other steps he might take from the White House. That's the campaign equivalent of a stiff arm there to the leader of the Democratic Party, basically saying, you can't help me right now. I got to do this more or less on my own down here in Nevada.
That's not helpful. All right, well, Adam Laxalt, for his part, is doing the opposite, right? He's trying to tie the senator to the president as much as possible.
That's exactly right. And look, when you're the challenger in a race like this, particularly in a situation where, let's say, Republicans take control of the Senate, they're still going to have a Democratic White House to deal with. Laxalt, in some ways, gets off easy here because, in many ways, he's not forced to define his own economic program. He can simply say, you don't like what the Democrats are doing, you don't like what President Biden is doing, I'll vote against it. I'll be a no vote. And in some cases, that can be enough. He is trying to tie Catherine Cortez Masto with his public comments and with his paid advertising to the president. Here's what he said about that last night.
Her whole message that she doesn't know who Joe Biden is and has never supported Joe Biden. That's what she spent the spring and summer doing. Now the voters understand that her record is her record. She never breaks from her party.
Tom, as a Senate reporter, I can tell you that it's a little disingenuous to talk about senators not breaking from Biden, because in a 50-50 Senate, Biden has basically had to take what the 50 Democratic senators can give him. And I think that's what Cortez Masto is trying to run on, saying we're driving the bus on these economic programs. We're the ones coming up with the compromises that you like, and Adam Laxalt won't give you that. But this is a toss-up state. It always is. In 2020, it was decided by 30,000 votes. It could be that close or closer this time around.
All right, Garrett, we're going to watch it closely. Nevada is critical. Thank you very much. Other news now, an unprecedented rise in kids' respiratory illness has health officials worried. Listen to this. 75% of pediatric hospital beds in the U.S., 75% are full, according to HHS. NBC News has confirmed that hospitals in at least 32 states have reported an increase in RSV cases in the last month. It's not just the number of cases that are causing concern, it's the timing here. RSV typically peaks in February. With hospitals already getting overwhelmed, health experts are wondering when the virus might peak this year and how much worse might things get. Adding to the concern, flu activity is also picking up in much of the country. And Europe's dealing with a COVID wave, which could be an early indicator that that's coming our way, too. Less than 10% of Americans, listen to this, less than 10% have gotten their updated COVID booster. NBC's Gabe Gutierrez joins me now. He's up in New York. Gabe, these numbers are not great. 32 states seen an increase. Gabe, can you hear me right now?
Talk about what they're seeing here here at this hospital in Queens, New York. We were at hospitals in Connecticut just a short time ago, and they're really feeling this. But here in Queens, this hospital is at above capacity right now. Another pediatric ICU that we went to in Connecticut was also full. And they're saying that right here, they're really trying to take as many precautions as they can as they see more respiratory illnesses over the coming months. Take a listen.
We're using extra space that we don't normally use to take care of kids. We're using perioperative space. We're using outpatient space. We're definitely getting creative to find space within our facility.
And so, Tom, this the hospital here in New York State is also feeling this increase in cases. But again, so many other states across the country reported 32 of them now seeing a rise in these respiratory illnesses. But those in Connecticut really feeling it over the last several weeks, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, the number, the stat is amazing. I know you had a problem with audio there, but 75% of pediatric hospital beds full nationwide. Yeah. And this now adds to the stress that we've already seen medical health care professionals under, right? Doctors and nurses in hospitals that are at capacity, at the breaking point. Is there a concern that they're approaching that level again? What are you hearing?
Well, Tom, and you know this. I mean, this is not what we saw during COVID, right, with the stress of healthcare workers back then. However, because so many healthcare workers have had to deal with so much over the last several years, many hospitals are now, trying to find out how they're going to keep some of the traveling nurses that they might have to go after. And, the shortage of healthcare workers really across the country. And as we head into this winter, many hospitals, not just here in the Northeast, but really across the country, are trying to find out how to retain some of these healthcare workers. And I asked the head of the emergency department here about that today. Take a listen to that.
We're all operating at capacity or even above capacity at this point on a daily basis. So you can imagine how it would lead to some fatigue and some challenge to keep the staff healthy, keep them safe, and keep them coming back, providing best care.
And again, Tom, the big question right now, as you said, RSV typically peaks in February, but all bets are off this year because they just don't know how long it will continue over the coming months. And cases are expected to rise as well as temperatures get cooler here in the Northeast, Tom.
Gabe Gutierrez reporting. Thank you very much. You can see Gabe's full report tonight on NBC Nightly News, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Today, the race to replace Liz Truss over in the UK as Prime Minister is picking up steam. Today, Leader of the House of Commons, Penny Mordaunt, officially became the first candidate to launch her bid to take over, saying that she's been encouraged by support from colleagues who want a fresh start. No word yet on whether Boris Johnson will run for his old job, but we are getting some hints. He's been on vacation in the Caribbean. But his father got on ITV in the UK saying he thinks Boris is on a plane on his way back to the UK. Either way, whoever takes over is looking at a long, long list of economic challenges. New data out today shows consumer spending there is down, with people buying less than before the pandemic. And wages have not been keeping up. Inflation up more than 10%, much more than the U.S. Inflation on food 14% higher. NBC's Molly Hunter has more from London.
Now, Conservative members of Parliament are going into a very, very busy weekend. This leadership contest is being completely fast-tracked. So the leadership contest that put Liz Truss into number 10 took months. This is taking about a week. So what is happening right now? Closed-door meetings, intense negotiations among members of Parliament in the Conservative Party to put together a short list. That short list is going to be out by Monday afternoon. The threshold to getting on it is 100 votes. 100 members of Parliament have to support a candidate. I'm just going to run you through the top contenders. So Penny Mordaunt is the only person who has now officially declared her candidacy. She became the UK's first female defense secretary in 2019, but we've actually seen her quite a bit more recently. She presided over the Accession Council of King Charles. She came in third in the last leadership council behind Liz Truss. The next person who's being put forward as a serious frontrunner, Rishi Sunak. He was the former finance minister. We saw a lot of him during the coronavirus pandemic. He came in second behind Truss. And then the third name that lots of people are talking about, at least speculating about, especially today, is former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. And Boris Johnson is an incredibly divisive figure. Right now, at a time, this country, and we've been speaking with people, they say they want reassurance, they want stability. Inflation right now, more than 10%. The pound is barely recovering after it crashed just a couple of weeks ago. Mortgage rates are incredibly high. This country is looking down a very cold winter. People are worried about heating their homes, and they want someone to offer them reassurance. I'm not convinced, talking to people, that Boris Johnson is that person. Remember that Boris Johnson just left office 45 days ago. All of the reasons, the scandals, the problems that he left office, the fact that he did not command support among the Conservative Party anymore, those things haven't changed in 45 days. But all of this will be made clear over the weekend. We should get that list by Monday. The vote then goes to the party members, and there should be a new prime minister of this country by Friday.
A lot going on in the UK. Other news now, police in Michigan are searching for a family of 4 missing for days. But we know about a 911 call that the father made before their disappearance is coming up. Plus, how much Pfizer is going to charge for its COVID vaccine when the U.S. government stops paying for it. How much will you and I have to pay? That's up in our 5 things we all need to know about. Stay with us. We're back, and a Michigan family of 4 has not been seen or heard from since Sunday after the father made what authorities describe as a paranoid call to 911. Police received the call from Anthony Sirigliano early Sunday when police arrived at the house. What they say is that they were concerned that he had expressed concern as well about information he had regarding the 911 terror attacks. No one has seen this family, the wife, Suzette, or their sons, Brandon and Noah, since the police visit. Their pets and an elderly relative who requires full-time care were left behind at the home in Fremont, Michigan, about 45 miles north of Grand Rapids. NBC's Jesse Kirsch joins me now from the area. And Jesse, what do police say about their interaction with the family when they did that house check after that midnight call to 911?
Yeah, so Tom, police say that the father sounded paranoid, and so authorities go to the house to check on the family. And according to authorities, they spent about an hour with the father. They made sure everyone was okay. And in the midst of that visit, according to authorities, the father talked about issues or information that he seemed to have or claimed to have regarding the September 11th attacks. And again, this ties in with what authorities say was paranoid behavior from the father. And as we know, it was that same day, Sunday, when, according to authorities, they were last heard from by loved ones. And you mentioned it there. They left behind a relative and pets, according to authorities. And that relative, we're told, has dementia. So this is obviously someone you wouldn't want to be leaving unattended. But at the same time, police say there have been no signs of foul play at this home.
What about other family members or neighbors around this family? Have they said anything about strange coincidences or anything else in the neighborhood at that time?
Yeah, at this point, according to authorities, they say that the people who know this family well say this is out of character for them. This is surprising and strange behavior if, in fact, they were to have just up and left on their own, which also would lend to a level of concern from the people who know them and care for them. According to authorities, the family's cell phones have been turned off. We know from police that both of these teenage sons of these parents have autism. And at this point, police are stressing if anyone sees this family, contact them. And they're also asking the parents, if they're out there and they're seeing this, if they're okay, to reach out to their loved ones and let them know they're okay, because obviously there's concern and a big question mark around this disappearance, Tom.
Yeah. Okay, Jesse, thank you very much. Jesse Kirsch. We want to get you over to the 5 things our team thinks that you should know about tonight, this Friday night. Number 1, Russia has conscripted at least 260,000 men to fight in the war against Ukraine. That, according to state media reports. The country is now closer to its goal of mobilizing 300,000 people. Putin's so-called partial mobilization process is expected to end in a week. Number 2, Pfizer has announced it plans to sell COVID vaccines at $110 to $130 per dose once the U.S. government stops paying for those doses. This is the list price, which means people with Medicare or private health care insurance will most likely not pay that much. As the country moves out of the emergency phase of the pandemic, COVID care will have to move now to a commercial market, most likely starting next year. Number 3, the ban of new handgun sales in Canada goes into effect today. The handgun freeze was announced in May to tackle violence in that country, and the new rules prohibit the sale, purchase, or transfer of handguns in Canada. The country's public safety minister called it the most significant action on gun violence in Canada in a generation. Number 4, Tom Brady has apologized for making a comparison between playing football football and military deployment. In a podcast earlier in the week, Brady said, quote, "I almost look at a football season like you're going away on deployment in the military." Brady said at a news conference yesterday that it was a very poor choice of words, and he has a tremendous amount of gratitude to everybody who served. Number 5, for those visiting Salem, Massachusetts during spooky season, come by train, ferry, or broomstick, just not by car. That's the message from the mayor today. The Witch City has seen a record number of tourists this year, up 15% from the same period last year. Now, the mayor believes the big crowds are due to pent-up demand following the pandemic and the release of Hocus Pocus 2. Today, the IRS has announced the largest increase ever in how much pre-tax money you can save for retirement starting next year. So come 2023, you'll be able to contribute up to $22,500 to your 401k. That's $2,000 more than during the current federal contribution limit. This now jump is happening because of inflation, of course. Your dollars are worth less this year than last, so you got to save more. And there's more to this as well. The 401 catch-up. The contribution limit for employees 50 and over is going to $7,500 a year. That's up from $6,500. And while the limit on annual contributions to an IRA increased as well, up to $6,500, that comes up from $6,000. CNBC's Ron Insana joins me now with more on this. All right, Ron, we break this down. The announcement from the IRS today. This is potentially very helpful for somebody who's really just trying to boost their retirement savings in inflationary times.
Yeah, and it's not just inflation, Tom. When you look at what's happened in the markets, obviously, and you're well aware of this, we've seen, the S&P 500, the benchmark for the U.S. stock market, fall about 25% for the year. We've seen bonds in a very unusual year fall more than 50%. So if you have what's described as a typical 60-40 portfolio as an individual investor, 60% stocks, 40% in bonds, you're down more than 20% on the year, and inflation is eating into your purchasing and savings power. So the Internal Revenue, along with these adjustments, is making adjustments, obviously, to Social Security payments and to tax brackets for next year as well.
Well, you anticipated one of my questions, but I read a stat from Vanguard which says only 14% of the participants in its program saved the maximum amount. It's hard often to save the maximum amount, but if you can, that really can help boost your savings.
Absolutely, 100%. And as the markets return to more normal over, the next 5 to 10 years, and you get that compounding effect, that money that's put to work is working for you towards retirement. Now, if you are making the median income of $60,000 a year, and let's say you're taking home $45,000, it's rough to put $6,000 or $6,500 away if you've got kids and you're trying to finance their lives, which now cost, by the way, from 0 to 18 years of age, costs over $18,000 a year with no frills just to raise a child. So, yeah, that's the reason why 14% of the people are able to make those contributions.
No frills, but lots of thrills, you might say.
I'm very accustomed to that, yes.
Listen, to your point about the tax brackets dropping, that could mean that you out there will find that, I don't owe as much money to Uncle Sam in tax year, next tax year, but in 2024, because I've dropped down in the tax brackets because the IRS has increased the tax brackets.
Yeah, and we haven't done this in a long time, right? I mean, all these inflation adjustments coming from the IRS, we really haven't seen this for about 40 years, Tom. I mean, that people used to complain about the compensation of Social Security, that the benefit increases of 1.5%, 2.5% were very small. But that was also against a base of 1.5% inflation annually. Now we've seen this pop to, on average, about 9%. And so the inflation adjustments for Social Security, for retirement savings, and, income or bracket creep are all being made now, as you would expect them, as the government, to do in times like this.
All right, I'm just going to underscore the headline once again. You can contribute more to your 401k, pre-tax dollars, $2,000 more next year than this year. So that is good news. Ron, thank you very much. And Ron and Sam. You too. Still to come, some breaking news on what kind of intel was found in documents at Mar-a-Lago. We'll be right back with that information. Breaking news since we've been on the air, that is that Senator Lindsey Graham is asking the Supreme Court now to step in and block that subpoena from the grand jury in Georgia. compelling him to testify in its investigation into possible election interference in the state of 2020. Now, the subpoena is looking for details about phone calls he made to top election officials in Georgia. The emergency request was sent to Justice Clarence Thomas, who can essentially refer it to the entire court, or he can decide for himself. And we have more breaking news. NBC News can now confirm the classified information and intelligence about Iran and China were found at former President Trump's Florida home. That, according to two people familiar with the matter. The news was first reported today by the Washington Post. The Justice Department is declining to comment, but NBC's Ken Delanian covers the Justice Department. Fill in the blanks here. We now know that the sensitivity of some of these documents seems to be even more significant than what we first thought.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. This is a big deal. These were among the most highly classified documents seized by the FBI at Mar-a-Lago, and they are highly sensitive intelligence about some of our foremost adversaries. And it's the kind of documents, the intelligence, that can literally get people killed if it falls into the wrong hands, can certainly expose sources and methods and show other countries what we're doing and what we're learning about them.
You probably can't answer this, but why would anybody want to hold on to that? Now, you know, President Trump has been, over the years, people have said he's a bit of a pack rat.
That's right.
But why hold on to intelligence information from China and Iran and potentially exposing or putting people's lives in jeopardy?
So that question, I think, sends this investigation in a new direction. It's one thing for Donald Trump to keep letters he exchanged with the North Korean leader. We can all understand.
He called them love letters.
Even though they're classified and he shouldn't have kept them, we understand why he wants them. And also clemency requests and things. But what possible purpose could he have with these highly technical documents, which, by the way, are extremely valuable to adversaries? It raises really uncomfortable and fundamental questions about what Donald Trump's motive was for keeping these documents.
Yes. You've also got to wonder whether intelligence agencies from other countries might have had a keen interest in swarming around Mar-a-Lago anyway, right? If they could get somebody posing as an insider and get inside, then they would have potentially access to this.
That is the great fear. And we already know that there were some shady characters, a Chinese woman who had multiple passports swarming around Mar-a-Lago. Look, there were Secret Service agents there, but this was not a secure facility. And it's the ultimate nightmare for the counterintelligence officials I talked to that highly sensitive documents were stored there.
Ken, thank you. Boy, you've been busy today as well. NBC's Ken Delanian, thank you very much. Still to come, our White House team's exclusive interview with First Lady Jill Biden to talk 2024, Hunter Biden and her White House role. We're getting into her unparalleled influence on President Biden coming up next. You know the drill. NBC covers hundreds of stories each day, and because you could not possibly read, watch, or listen to all of them, our bureau teams have done it for you and for me. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions. It's a segment we like to call The Local. From our Midwest bureau, a teenager is expected to plead guilty on Monday to a Michigan school shooting that killed 4 students last year. The 16-year-old is facing several felony charges, including murder and terrorism. The teenager was accused of using a gun bought by his parents, who also face involuntary manslaughter charges. If he pleads guilty, he would be the first suspect to be found guilty of terrorism in a school shooting. As for his parents, that'll be a rare instance where parents could also be held accountable. From our Southern Bureau, a Miami judge has dismissed a voter fraud charge against one of those 20 people arrested in Governor Ron DeSantis' election fraud program. The judge dismissed Robert Lee Wood's case, saying the prosecutor did not have jurisdiction over him. Wood, along with 19 others, were previously convicted of serious crimes, murder or felony sex crimes. Then they got out and they voted in 2020. A state constitutional amendment allows felons to have their voting rights restored, but that excluded those convicted of murder or felony sex crimes. Today's ruling is a blow to Governor DeSantis, who made the push to tighten voting laws in the wake of false claims that the 2020 election was stolen. The state is expected to appeal today's ruling. From our Western Bureau, landscapers found a decades-old car buried in the backyard of a San Francisco Bay Area home. Police say that the car was thought to have been buried there since the 90s. How and why it ended up there is under investigation. The current homeowners are not associated with the vehicle, which is being excavated and mostly dug out yesterday. President Biden is not expected to announce whether he will run for a second term in 2024 until after the midterms. And associates say that outside of the president himself, the most influential, most important voice in that decision will be the First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden. NBC News sat down with the First Lady exclusively, and when asked about a second term, she said, quote, he understands government more than anybody else. And Dr. Biden has re-imaged and reimagined the role of a First Lady with her influence in the White House, relaying stories from her travels across the country to the president, which have helped shape policy. In the interview, she also said that her son, Hunter, who is under federal investigation, has broken no laws, she says. Joining me now is NBC's Mike Memoli, who was part of our team that interviewed the First Lady. All right, Mike, so she is saying right now that, well, I'll let you say. What precisely is she saying or hinting at or not saying about Biden running?
Well, Tom, it's 17 days until the midterm elections, which means 18 days until every day I'm going to get asked the same question. Is Joe Biden running for re-election? And so with Carol Lee, Peter Nicholas, we went to the source. We went to the decider, the person who is going to be... The decider, you said. The decider. The decider, the person who's going to be really, I think, the biggest influence on that key decision. And it's clear that she's getting the same caution from lawyers that the president is getting. So she wouldn't explicitly say that she wants him to run for re-election. She did say she still thinks he's the most effective person to run the government. What's more interesting is what an advisor to the First Lady said to us, which is that both Dr. Biden and the family are on board with a second term, with a campaign for a second term. That family meeting, that family sign-off has always been the final factor leading into a decision, and so I think that's significant. And in fact, they're indicating that they don't even need to have that family meeting after the election. That decision's already been made. I've covered him long enough, though, Tom, to know wait until it's actually in paperwork filed with the FEC. Yep. Then we'll know it's real.
All right, talk about Hunter Biden now. This is, of course, her adopted son. He's had some legal trouble the last few, well, he's been under federal investigation, some legal trouble the last few months and years. And what is she saying about that?
Well, this has really, I think, raised the most eyebrows from our interview, is the fact that she said he's innocent, that she's confident he's done nothing wrong. And as she put it, everyone and their brother has investigated Hunter. And the context for this is important. We asked her about the fact that obviously Democrats have so much at stake politically in these midterm elections, but personally, right? If Republicans take over the House, it means more investigations. Republican committee chairman launching probe after probe. And she indicated that that's not going to dissuade her or their family, the concerns about what that might mean for them moving forward, that they're, A, committed to electing Democrats now, but B, they're just going to ignore the noise and keep doing what they can for the American people.
So she is still teaching,
that's right?
She teaches at a community college here in the Northern Virginia area. It's twice a week, is that right? How often is she in class?
So she's in class all day on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And what's remarkable is, you know, she did this as second lady, very under the radar. Even many of her students didn't know she was the second lady. Now there's no mistaking it. They have to go through magnetometers every day. They have a security briefing at the start of their semester. But this is just one way in which she really has reimagined the role of First Lady. We've never seen one quite like her. She considers her role as a teacher to be really critical, but she also sees her role as sort of the bubble piercer of the administration. She travels out more than the president even, talking to, in red states, I found most interesting. She's been to many that her husband hasn't been to yet. And she says, I bring back stories. I bring back the concerns of sort of real Americans. I'm not necessarily in policy meetings, but I tell the president stories, and that helps influence the policy.
Eleanor Roosevelt did the same thing.
That's right.
Can I ask you in 15 seconds, she's been booed in some red states, right? Which is, it's hard to understand why you'd boo a first lady, but she's been booed. How does she take that?
She's been booed even in Philly, her hometown.
Yeah.
They booed Santa Claus, though.
It's Philly.
But she says she understands it. She says she's committed, though, to be a first lady for all Americans, not just for those who voted for her husband.
I don't care which party you're part of. You don't boo the first lady. But anyway, all right. Mike, thank you. Mike Memoli. All right, that's a wrap for us on a Friday. We're going to have more for you right here on Monday. Same time, same place. Hallie will be back. Coverage resumes right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.